I'm not so sure about this, Wilbur.
Come on, Orv. It's like riding a bike, just with wings.
Maybe there's a reason humans weren't made to fly. Maybe we were made to stay on the ground.
Orville, remember that time Father brought home that toy flying machine and we played with it until it broke?
Yeah,
And then we tried to build our own out of wood lying around the house?
we tried everything to get that thing to fly.
But when we were just about to give up, Father told us to keep going.
I remember.
He said,
It's the hard way, but it's the right way. The right way. We're breaking free. We're soaring, flying. There's not a star in heaven that we can't reach. If we're trying, yeah. Forget the cage, cause we know how to make the key. Oh damn, suddenly we're free to fly. We're going up through the atmosphere, up where the air is clear. Oh, let's go with you and I, defying gravity. With you and I, defying gravity. They'll never bring us down. So what do you say, Orville? Let's make history.
everything is connected. To learn anything, you have to build on what you already know. Whether it's science, art, or philosophy, we can connect everything to anything. So let's learn anything. Let's find those connections and let's build our intuition.
Welcome to Intuition. I'm your host, Evan Noce, and today we are talking about planes, the technology that made the world smaller. Ever since we have been able to write, humans have dreamed up stories of taking to the sky like a bird in the breeze. In Publius Ovidius Naso's Metamorphoses, written around 40 BCE, the legend of Daedalus and his son Icarus still captivate us today. Daedalus fashioned wings out of wax and feathers for them to escape prison. Icarus, ignoring the instructions of his father, continued to climb higher to the sun until the wax in the wings melted and Icarus crashed into the sea. The story is often alluded to for a demonstration of human hubris with technological advancement. But in this case, I want it to be an example of how captivating flight has been to humanity. A common thread that has driven almost every major engineer in history to try to climb towards that sun. Our first torchbearer in this regard will be Leonardo da Vinci. You may be familiar with some of his artwork, such as, The Last Supper and the Mona Lisa, but the Italian Renaissance man was also a renowned mathematician, scientist, and engineer of machines, weapons, and flying machines. Most of his thoughts, notes, and designs went unknown to the public while he was alive, and it was only after hundreds of years, a war, and an Italian physicist, Giovanni Battista Venturi, that his technical notes began to be noticed. Da Vinci had an obsession with flying from around 1488 to 1514. His dream was to build machines that emulated the freedom of birds. In his collection of notes called the Codex on the Flight of Birds, he writes, "A bird is an instrument working according to mathematical law, an instrument which is within the capacity of man to reproduce with all of its movements." He desired not only to understand why birds could fly, but make a flying instrument of his own. Much of what Da Vinci learned during this time was revolutionary and set the foundation for modern aerodynamics, or the study of fluid flow over objects. Key to his work was the concept of lift, which will be the first component in our understanding of how planes work. Lift is what causes something to, well, lift. The difference, though, between lifting a box and lifting a plane is that we are getting the air itself to do the lifting. In Da Vinci's notes, he states that when the surface of an object strikes the air, it compresses underneath it, like a featherbed under a sleeper. Then the object rebounds off the air like a ball striking the wall. This explanation is right, but for the wrong reason. Let's break down his theory in two parts. First, when an object moves through the air, it compresses the air to a high pressure. Second, the high pressure underneath the object pushes the object upwards. It is true that there is a higher pressure under the wings of a flying object that creates lift. However, it is not caused by the compression of air. It turns out that the air above the wings of a plane drops in pressure rather than the air below the wing increasing in pressure. The reason for this is the most difficult part of this lesson, so bear with me. When fluids move faster, their pressure decreases. Think what happens when the bottom of a pool or water bottle springs a leak. A jet of water shoots out since the pressure is much higher near the bottom of the body of water. But if you were to grab a handful of that jet of water, the pressure of that water isn't high anymore. So what happened to that pressure? It can't be destroyed. So it must have been used in speeding up the water to create the jet. That is the same reason why faster moving air is at a lower pressure. So how do we make the air on top of a wing move faster? We change the shape of the object. The next time you look at a plane wing or watch a bird fly, notice the shape of the top and bottom of the wing. The top makes an arch or curve, while the bottom is typically almost flat. This design is purposeful and crucial to the lift of the plane. As the air flows over the wing, it has to take a longer path around the curve than the bottom. In order for the air to meet back up with itself after the wing, it has to move faster, similar to how the edge of a record or river moves faster than around a curve that goes through the center. And since we know faster moving air is at a lower pressure, the second part of Leonardo's theory comes true. The object is lifted by the higher pressure underneath the wing. Another aspect of lift we haven't discussed yet is how we get the air moving. Lift is reliant on the speed or velocity of the object. From the wing's perspective, it doesn't matter if the air moves over the wing or if the wing moves over the air. So as long as one is moving relative to the other, we're okay. The faster you move, the more lift you can generate. While Da Vinci predicted velocity was important, he didn't know how important. With more modern mathematics, we know that lift is proportional to the square of the velocity. Proportional means when one increases, the other increases. The square of velocity is the velocity multiplied by itself, which just means that lift is even more reliant on velocity than Da Vinci predicted. For example, if you were to double your speed, your lift would quadruple, all things being equal. Moving away from Da Vinci, we can now pass on the torch to Isaac Newton in the late 17th century. Now, Newton wasn't an engineer, but a gifted experimentalist whose theories on physics and mathematics have changed not only what we know about the universe, but also how we learn it. Newton himself did build on the works of Galileo, Descartes, and Huygens, stating, "If I have seen further, it is because I have stood on the shoulders of giants." A sentiment he stole from Middle Age religious texts. So, how does Newton contribute to our flying machine? Well, unfortunately, he puts up the roadblock to building flying machines: drag. "Hey Mom, I'm leaving." "Take your little brother with you." "Ugh, but he's such a drag. Look at him." Even Da Vinci knew that flying objects had resistance moving through the air. Try to fan a large piece of cardboard and you'll experience it for yourself. But it wasn't until Newton's mathematics that we could associate a number with that resistance. Newton hypothesized that fluids had viscosity, a property of how easily you could separate a fluid from itself. Higher viscosities, like honey, would have a difficult time being separated, while lower viscosities, like air, would have little to no difficulty. But even if air has a much lower viscosity than honey, they both will resist being broken apart. Remember earlier when I said the air is separated between the top and bottom of a wing? Yep, drag and lift unfortunately go hand in hand. Both are proportional to the square of the velocity. So if we're trying to build a flying machine, we can't rely on simply going faster to solve our problems, based on Newton's equation. In fact, Newton's drag equation, or the sine squared law, was used to dissuade the building of flying machines, a knot that wouldn't be untied until the works of Leonard Euler, Joseph Lagrange, and Pierre-Simon Laplace. Though as crucial as their work is to physics and aerodynamics, the math at this point begins to exceed the level I wish to discuss here, so we'll be taking a pivot from here on out. First, though, we're going to take a break, and when we return, we'll talk about two men who started not as engineers or physicists, but printing publishers and bicycle repairmen, two brothers determined to create the first flying machine, Wilbur and Orville Wright. Hey, how's that plane prototype coming? Awful. It can't make turns, it's lopsided, and we've got nowhere to fly it. It's like the laws of physics are working against us. Yeah. If only we could bend the laws of physics. Bend the law... Wait, that's it! If we physically bend the wings, it would be able to bank turns. Grab your coat. We've got some laws to bend. Wait! We still have to deal with the prototype being lopsided. No amount of bending will fix that. You're right. Maybe all my thinking is misaligned. Misaligned? Wait, that's it! If we intentionally put the operator further from the center of mass, the engine and operator should counteract one another. Grab your coat. We're finally on track. Wait, we still don't have a place to fly it. It's too crowded around here to safely fly it. You're right. If only the town was deserted, then we'd be okay. Desert, that's it. We test it in the desert. Grab your coat. We've got a plane to fly. Hey, man. Yeah? I'm glad we did things the right way. Welcome back. Before the break, we discussed a bit of the history of aerodynamics and learned about the two key forces to building a flying machine, lift and drag. I also teased the first inventors of powered controlled flight, the Wright Brothers. Now, the wording of that title is very specific, and up to this point I have called our plane a flying machine, because though what the Wright brothers did in the early 20th century was revolutionary, it wasn't the first thing we've created to fly. Kites, fireworks, and gliders were already in the air well before the Wright brothers were even born. However, all the flying devices required a breeze to maintain flight. Think of it like a sailboat as opposed to a steamboat. The sailboat relies on wind to move the ship, whereas a steamboat relies only on itself to move forward. Hence the elusive flying machine, a device capable of sustained, controlled flight without the need for a breeze. With that, let's turn to the family of Milton and Susan Wright, who spent the better part of 25 years moving through the states Indiana, Ohio, and Iowa. Their third son, Wilbur, was born in a small county in Indiana in 1867. After moving to Dayton, Ohio, their fourth son, Orville, was born in 1871. Milton was an ordained minister, but after being made bishop, moved his family to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Like I said, a lot of moving. A trip Milton took into the hinterlands turned out to be one of the most important trips to the lives of the youngest sons, Wilbur and Orville, from one simple small gift, a toy helicopter. The simple device used a twisted rubber band to spin a set of propellers to create lift. Nearly every biography on the Wright brothers highlights this toy helicopter as it became almost an obsession to the young brothers. They spent time building their own toy helicopters and testing them out around the house, experiments that were highly encouraged by their family. Moving ahead, by the year 1892, Wilbur and Orville were inseparable. They lived together and worked together as editors and publishers of West Side News, though their interest in printing was overshadowed by something new, the safety bicycle. As opposed to the large wheel bicycles of the past, the two-wheel, sprocket chain drive, air-filled tires of the modern bike captivated the nation and the brothers. Together, they started a repair bicycle shop and put their aptitude for mechanics to work. This put the two brothers at the right place at the right time. The death of a German, Otto Lilienthal. The man had worked for years trying to build a flying machine and died attempting to use one. His death was recorded in an article, Flying Man, which reawakened the wonder Wilbur and Orville had felt as children playing with the toy helicopter. Building off the work of the Smithsonian, which Wilbur had written a letter to, the Wright brothers had a wealth of articles, reports, and pamphlets detailing the works of Lilienthal, Langley, Huffaker, and Mulliard. By 1899, the brothers had pored over every possible document, every prior work they could get their hands on. Gliders versus powered flight, huge machines, and pairs of human wings. The only thing that the Wright brothers couldn't understand was how to control the plane once it was in the air. How could you make the plane turn in a particular direction? This is the final missing piece in building our flying machines, and the answer, of course, comes from birds. If you watch a bird very closely as it turns left and right in the air, it has to bank into the turns, or lean such that one wing is higher than the other. This is a lot like riding a bike. You can't just turn the wheel, you have to kind of lean into the turn as well. So how do we get the machine to lean? Imagine sticking your hand out the window of a moving car. Even when you lie your hand flat, you will feel a little bit of lift. Change that angle and the lift will increase, driving your hand up. Now imagine you're flying through the sky and mirror that feeling on both hands. If you were to angle your right hand upward and your left hand downward, your right hand would want to move up and your left hand would want to move down. Now you would be in the prime position to bank left. This is how we can achieve controlled flight. Going back to the Wright brothers, though they knew what they needed to do, how were they going to do it? Wilbur found the solution from twisting a cardboard box. He determined that if a cardboard box could withstand twisting, maybe a cloth-covered, wooden-framed wing could too. The two built a kite-like glider to test the theory, which proved successful. All right, jumping ahead one last time, after successful gliding tests, the brothers were urged to try to add a motor to the glider. The extra weight and power of the engine proved challenging to implement, but the results came together on December 17th, 1903. After 7 weeks of assembling their machine in their camp near Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the 40-foot wingspan glider was complete. They had already tried to fly it 3 days prior, but Wilbur had stalled the plane and damaged it, which I'll discuss later. After 3 days of repairs, it was time to try once more. With Orville at the controls, at around 10:35, 5 local citizens watched as the world's first flying machine took to the sky, covering about 120 feet in 12 seconds. Then Wilbur gave it a try and flew 175 feet. Then Orville flew 200 feet. Finally, on the 4th day, Wilbur flew 852 feet over the course of a minute. There was no doubt anymore. It had been done. A quest started since before Da Vinci had been achieved. The flying machine. Now, a bit ago, I mentioned that Wilbur had stalled the aircraft 3 days prior to Orville's success. So what does that mean? Well, if we go back to our hand out of the car example, you'll notice that as you increase the angle of your hand, the force that lifts your hand up will increase. This is known as the angle of attack. And as it increases, so does the lift generated. With a catch. If you turn your hand all the way vertical, the lift vanishes. Your wing becomes more like a wall. As a result, there is a breaking point when the wing becomes more like a wall and the lift drops off. Couple that with the fact that you are expending kinetic energy to climb higher and higher in the air, and the plane comes to a screeching halt midair, falling out of the sky. That is what stalling is. So, why did Wilbur stall on his first attempt? Nerves? Inexperience? We'll probably never know. But maybe, just maybe, he was just trying to see how high he could go, and as the plane climbed, flew just a little bit too close to the sun. Maybe you would call that hubris. But me? I call that being human. If you like what you heard here and want to learn more, the content of this episode comes in part from the book Wilbur and Orville, a biography of the Wright Brothers by Fred Howard, as well as other sources which you can find out about in the description. If you would like to view a transcript or want to cite this episode, that information is also in the description. Entuition is an independent project currently run only by myself, so if you would like to hear more, please share this with your friends and family. Your support is invaluable. That means valuable, by the way.